He wanted to believe that wasn't true, simply because she was present at this tomb. He ignored the placidly smiling dark elves in the corner of his mind. "Are you almost ready? We've finished our preparations. If you like, please come and make yourself at home." There were several tables and chairs on the grass. The tables were covered with pure white cloths, shaded by parasols. The Death Knights who had carried everything were quietly lined up out of the way, along the log cabin-s wall. "We've set out some refreshments for you." There were chilled decanters on the table, with water droplets clinging to them. Inside was an orange liquid. Next to the decanters were clear, delicate glass cups. All the items were exquisitely ornate. Even Jerknev, an emperor who spent his days surrounded by only the best life had to offer, widened his eyes in surprise. "If you need anything, please let us know." "Girls," the door to the log cabin opened once again, and more maids came out. They were so gorgeous that Jerknev momentarily forgot everything that had happened so far. A chignon, a straight cut, and rolled curls. Each of the three women had her own type of beauty. "This place is full of pretty ladies." Jerknev agreed with the comment from one of his guards. Why were there so many good-looking women at this tomb? Did it spawn them? Did they grow out of the ground? He heard someone else suck their teeth, but he decided to ignore it. "Let us have a drink," someone said. "No, more importantly, when will I be able to meet Sir Aints Ul Gown? I'd like to see him as soon as possible. It would be fine even if it's only me. If I could have a few minutes before his meeting with Jur, that would be enough." "Fluda, would you calm down? This rudeness couldn't go on any longer. Don't forget why you ray here. We've come as representatives of the Empire, not to seek the magic knowledge you want so badly." A glimmer of composure returned to Fluda's eyes, just enough for him to restrain his personal desires. "Your Imperial Majesty, do excuse me. I seem to have gotten a bit excited. My deepest apologies for having disturbed everyone. That's the way, Gramps. Have a drink and chill out a bit." "Okay, I'd like a drink." "Yes, sir." Yuri poured orange liquid into the glass in front of the seat Jerknev sat in. A sweet citrus smell filled the air. Jerknev took a sip of the fruit water and smiled in spite of himself. It was so delicious. He wondered what he had been drinking all this time. The guards looked surprised as well. If Jerknev, who lived a life of luxury, was surprised, surely the guards were infinitely more shocked. Many of them even forgot their manners and guzzled their portions. "This is great. What is this stuff?" "The tart and sweet flavors are perfectly balanced. It goes down so smoothly and doesn't leave any cloying sweetness in the mouth." Listening to the comments around him, Jerknev took another drink. He suddenly felt energy welling up inside him. Was his body stimulated because the drink tasted so good? "So Nazarick has extremely high-class drinks as well. I guess I was inadvertently rude to those dark elves. If this is the kind of thing they drink every day, they must have thought what we served them was disgusting." Jerknev smiled wryly. Who knew a single drink could make one feel so defeated? "Ah, my mind is at peace. Yes, I feel peaceful for the first time since coming here. Maybe I could just go home now." How long did he stay out of the sun listening to the sound of the wind rushing across the spring meadow? Eventually Yuri spoke the words Jerknev had been dreading. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. Lord Aints is ready now. Right this way." Jerknev arrived at a large dome-shaped room. Before him was a massive door. There were strangely elaborate carvings of a goddess on the right and a demon on the left. Looking around, he saw countless sinister-looking statues. If I had to give it a name, maybe it was the Gate of Judgment. Those were Jersiv's thoughts as he stood gazing at it. Silence dominated the room to the point that the quiet itself seemed audible. Perhaps it was more that no one who had been brought that far had uttered a word. The only sound was the occasional metal on metal of someone moving in their armor. It was less about restraining themselves to observe good manners and more that the luxurious scenery they had passed through on their way had stunned them. Faced with this mythological realm, asking them to hold in their astonishment was too much. Even Jerknev found himself unable to suppress the urge to glance here and there as they walked. Their surroundings were just that amazing. He looked over his shoulder at the subordinates who had accompanied him this far bassward, 10 select guards, Fluda and his disciples, his secretary Reornit, and the priests of the Night Order. Lanas and the other guards were keeping watch over the carriages. All those behind him, with the exception of Fluda, apparently felt unworthy. They keenly sensed how small and insignificant they were, the result of walking down a hallway that the Empire couldn't replicate even if they exhausted all its cultural arts. The great tomb of Nazareth, a tomb in name only, was a gorgeous world, a residence fit for the gods. Their impression of the caster who ruled over it, Aints Ul Gaun, had become colossal. It was hardly describable. Jerkniv wore a borderline self-deprecating smile. People have an instinct to bow their heads before anything superior to them. If anyone was unmoved by this exceedingly grand building and its furnishings, they surely possessed a heart of stone. This is a real problem. Aints Ul Gaun, awaiting him beyond that door, surpassed Fluda as a caster. He was probably unrivaled in all of history. The grandeur of his home surpassed human imagination. His followers were immensely powerful. In other words, he was a being who encapsulated every manner of might. Why had he been keeping himself cooped up until now? Jerkniv didn't know the answer, but he figured he would soon find out. With the coming talks, he should be able to grasp at least some of the caster's aims. He wouldn't make all these power plays only to ask for my apology, then send me home, right? At first, his plan had been to investigate Aints Ul Gaun's desires. He wanted to find a way to manipulate them to the Empire's advantage. The apology was no more than an excuse to meet, but what could possibly motivate someone with so much power? Nothing I can offer would be enough. There was a good chance that, just as a single carrot gem wouldn't arouse Jerkniv's interest, anything Jerkniv could offer wouldn't inspire any desires in Aints Ul Gaun. For starters, money was out of the question. As for military might and magic technology, Aints Ul Gaun wouldn't be interested. The Empire's strength and development was so inferior to his own. Enticing him with companionship would also be pointless, considering Yuri and the others. So what does he want? Jerkniv had no idea. Maybe desire, as humans experience it, wasn't enough to move Aints Ul Gaun. He thought of countless ways of handling his adversary, then concluded that nothing could be done. He figured the smartest course of action was to make sure things didn't become hostile. Victory this time means shielding the Empire from harm and making it home alive. This might be difficult. With those thoughts on his mind, his voice echoed louder than he intended. But no one reacted. They were completely transfixed by the world around them. The throne room is through here. Lord Aints is waiting for you. Yuri bowed toward Jerkniv and the others, indicating her work was done. As if her words were the cue, the massive door slowly swung open, even though no one touched it. Someone gasped. Not just one person or even two. Probably more than 10 people gasped. Most of the people with him were shaken. This showed they weren't prepared. It was a manifestation of their desire to flee. It meant many of them had been hoping the door wouldn't open. I guess I should be thankful it opened automatically. If he had had to wait for everyone to steel themselves, they may never have opened the door. The room that came into view was huge, and the ceiling was high. The walls were primarily white with ornamentation done mainly in gold. Magnificent chandeliers hung from the ceiling. They were made of jewels in a rainbow of colors and cast a dreamy, sparkling light. On the walls, hanging from the ceiling to the floor, were large flags. It was a perfect realization of the idea of a throne room. Jerkniv couldn't think of a name more fitting. Then he and all those in his entourage went pale at the presence that rushed out at them. There was a red carpet running down the center of the room. Along either side stood beings whose power was so great there were no words. A demon, a dragon, a strange humanoid creature, an armored knight, an insect on 2 legs, a spirit. They came in all shapes and sizes, but they all shared next-level strength. They were lined up along the sides of the carpet. Jerkniv couldn't bring himself to count them. All of them stared at him in silence. It was said that people of a certain class and authority had powerful eyes, but this was the first time Jerkniv had felt physical pressure from a gaze. From behind him, he heard a hoarse shriek and rattling metal signs that his subordinates were afraid. But let us be honest. Jerkniv didn't feel like scolding them for making their fear known. On the contrary, he very much wanted to praise their self-control, since none of them had run away. No one had fled from this being, who struck instinctive fear into humans. Jerkniv bumped his alert level up another 10 notches. His guard was higher than ever, because he realized even that was an underestimation. He had come to the conclusion that Aints Ul Gaun was a danger to the continued existence of not only the Empire, but of entire races, not only humans, but subhumans as well. Jerkniv looked to the end of the carpet. Off in the distance were some stairs with several people standing around them. He guessed they were aides of some sort. There was a beautiful girl with silver hair. There was also a pale blue monster, like an upright insect. A man in a suit seemed half human, half frog. 2 dark elves were also present, and the sight of them put Jerkniv slightly more at ease. If the 2 who had instantaneously killed so many of his men were mere grunts, he probably would have lost his mind. Shifting his line of sight to the top of the stairs, he saw a gorgeous woman with wings, and beyond her, so that seated on a throne made of crystal, holding a curious staff, was a horrifying embodiment of death, a monster with its bone head exposed. It was as if darkness had focused on a single point and coalesced into this being. That Aints Ool Gown. On his head was a splendid crown-like object, and he wore a luxurious raven-black robe. Numerous rings gleamed on his fingers. Even at a distance, Jerkniv could tell the brilliantly made accessories this creature adorned himself with would be impossible for any artisan in the Empire to make. Flames the color of spilled blood lit the vacant orbits of Aints Ool Gown's skeletal head. Jerkniv felt those flames licking over him and the others. He wasn't at all surprised Gown wasn't human. On the contrary, he was glad. Since Aints Ool Gown was an inhuman monster, it was easier to accept his transcendent abilities. Jerkniv exhaled lightly. It was an exhalation of determination. Not much time had passed since the door opened. It probably was still acceptable to not have spoken yet, but he couldn't just stand dumbstruck at the entrance forever. So he stepped forward. "Let us go," Jerkniv said in a low voice that only his subordinates behind him could hear. Anyone who was looking probably would have been surprised to hear the words, since his mouth hadn't moved. It wasn't magic, just something he'd learned to do. Of course, at times like these it was a precious skill, but he didn't sense anyone moving in response. Standing before Aints Ool Gown meant walking past all the grotesques lining the carpet. Even if they knew they weren't going to be attacked, it would take courage to walk past so many. It wasn't simple optimism that convinced Jerkniv they wouldn't be attacked. It was a well-known truth. If a throne room was being used, it was usually for something ceremonial, to demonstrate a nation's authority. In other words, choosing this location meant his aim was to impress Nazarik's power upon them. He wouldn't kill them here. If he wanted to slaughter them, he would have taken them to a slaughterhouse. His subordinates should have understood that too, yet they still couldn't step forward. More than anything, their instincts were probably forbidding them to go any closer. Beyond the grotesques were the aides. The power within them was enough to break any scale of levels. Then on the throne, Aints Ool Gown. Jerkniv finally realized that Gown must be what they called a god. Even with the mental defense item Jerkniv had equipped, the pressure he felt was extraordinary. If he wasn't careful, the man known as the Fresh Blood Emperor would end up on his knees. But that was precisely why he had to press on. Just as Jerkniv was observing Aints Ool Gown, Gown was observing him. If the Emperor failed to make an impression here, what would happen to his country? He had to at least get Gown to recognize some measure of his worth. Then he could connect that to the continued existence of the Empire. Jerkniv smiled wryly. Verbal warfare? Huh. This was the very definition of regret. Anything he did now was meaningless. He should probably just try to minimize the damage. "Let us go," Jerkniv ordered forcefully. It was for those behind him, but also to steal his own body and soul. He sensed them following him. The carpet was soft. Considering how he was feeling, it was altogether too fluffy. Shrugging off the countless ghastly presences surrounding him, he walked forward, focusing only on Aints Ool Gown. His instincts told him that if he took his eyes off his objective, his feet would stop moving. It wasn't as if Jerkniv was a brilliant warrior. He was able to lead the way, even though his guards were frightened. His mental strength, fostered by being emperor, allowed it. Soon he reached the base of the stairs where the aides were standing. "Lord Aints, the Baharuth Emperor, Jerkniv Rune Farlord El Nix, is requesting an audience." The winged woman attending the crystal throne had a lovely voice that suited her beauty. Jerkniv noticed this detail, even though he hadn't intended to. The being, who seemed like a representation of death, created by the gods themselves, spoke in reply. "Good of you to come, Emperor of Baharuth. I am the master of the great tomb of Nazarik, Aints Ool Gown." It was a more normal human-like voice than Jerkniv had expected. He relaxed ever so slightly. He had a chance to read the emotions contained in those words. "I heartily thank you for your welcome, Sir Aints Ool Gown." Since his face was a skull, his expression was a total mystery to Jerkniv. He wondered what would be a proper way to begin. The one who broke that silence was neither Jerkniv nor Aints, Lord Aints. I feel it is disrespectful for a mere human to attempt to speak to you as equals. Then the man said, bow down. A chorus of metallic clanks sounded behind Jerkniv. He could imagine what had happened without looking. His attendants had probably yielded to the man's command and bowed down. Perhaps they were desperately trying to stand. He could hear groaning. They had probably been compelled by a powerful psychic attack. Without the necklace that Jerkniv never took off, he would have been groveling too. Countless eyes moved to the Emperor, the sole visitor remaining standing. They were the cold eyes of someone observing an animal during an experiment. Cut it out, Demiurge. Yes, my lord. Demiurge, a somewhat frog-like monster, bowed reverently to his master. You are released. With the invisible pressure lifted, Jerkniv could hear sighs of relief behind him. Sir Jerkniv Rune Farlord El Nix. You've come so far, but my subordinate did something impolite. I hope you'll forgive me for not properly keeping him in check. If you so wish it, I will even bow my head to you. A disturbance rippled through the crowd of monsters. Multiple emotions clashed inside Jerkniv. His caution stemmed from the realization that Aints Ulgaun wasn't the type to operate through power alone. His relief stemmed from the same. Above all, however, he felt fear. This fear stemmed from the knowledge that Aints Ulgaun had a firm grip over the minds of every monster present. At the same time, he had a bad feeling that everything was going according to Aints' plan. It was a strange feeling that everything had been arranged ahead of time. No need to apologize, Sir Gaun, Aints said. Subordinates often misunderstand their master's intentions and act recklessly. It seems some people in the Empire have been doing the same, I am ashamed to say. One of the guards who had been freed suddenly rushed forward with an urn. He placed it next to Jerkniv. He was supposed to act immediately, but he had hesitated. Did Gaun's subordinate act in order to get me to do this? If so, then I may need to veer off the prepared route. No, I can see that would be the same as bringing a real sword to a sparring demonstration. If I go against the flow, I'll get seriously injured. This is bad. I am not sure if I should call this place a tomb or not, but this is the head of the foolish noble who unilaterally sent raiders into your tomb. I'd like you to accept it. Inside the urn was Count Vermeer's head. He was the noble Jerkniv had indirectly instructed to dispatch the workers. The reason he kept around aristocrats who had neither pros nor cons was to use them in situations like this. Dead men told no tales. Jerkniv wasn't sure how much Aints Ulgaun knew, but he figured it was better to put a lid on anything that stank. The reason Nazarik's messengers came could very well have been a threat. It was to force the master of the Empire to take responsibility for the workers setting foot in Aints' palace. Which was why Jerkniv would escape the situation by insisting he knew absolutely nothing. The beautiful woman next to Aints made a subtle gesture with her jaw. Then Demiurge carried the urn up the steps. He knelt before Aints and took out the severed head. Aints took the head. I accept it. I wonder what I should do with this. It would be a waste to simply toss it. Oh, he must be joking. I see. He must know that Vermeer was being manipulated. The important question is where he got that information. Suddenly, the Countess' head moved in the skeletal hand. At first he thought Aints had moved it, but he soon understood he was mistaken. A thick liquid coated the head, which then dropped out of Aints' hand onto the floor. That development was so shocking that Jerkniv's eyes stayed glued to the head. As he watched, a fountain of goopy black liquid sprayed onto the floor. When the liquid finished raining down, a large suit of black armor was standing there. A Death Knight. Strangled gasps rose from behind Jerkniv. That's absurd. Yuri had certainly meant it literally when she said he created them. Jerkniv willed himself not to bite his lower lip. He couldn't bear doing something so pathetic. Go, get in line. Following an order that seemed to resonate from the pit of the earth, the Death Knight descended the stairs and disappeared from Jerkniv's view. How many more Death Knights can he create? Can he create as many as he wants if he has enough human corpses? That can be. But if he can do this, then can he create an undead more powerful than a Death Knight? He might actually be able to. Now then, Sir Jerkniv Rune Farlord El Nix. Hearing that quiet voice, Jerkniv came back to his senses and turned to Aints with a pleasant face. Oh, Sir Gaun, you can call me Jerkniv. My name is so long. Oh, then I'll do that, Sir Jerkniv. First of all, I am sorry you had to see that. Well, my subordinate's rudeness earlier has cancelled out the trouble the noble caused to Nazarik, so we have nothing more to discuss. I realize you took the time to come all this way, but you may go now. Huh, he understand what he had just been told. Sorry, I don't think I heard you properly. Do you mind saying that again? An apology is no longer necessary. You may go, I am going to be a bit busy now anyway. Aints waggishly shrugged. Jerknev had no idea what was going on. Didn't he have some other reason for summoning them in addition to making them apologize? Wasn't it strange of him to forgive them so simply? His conduct was too inconsistent. Wait, what did he say? Excuse me, but what do you mean you'll be busy? Thanks to you I learned that even if I live here minding my own business, there will be trouble. So I figure I'll go above ground and crush the trouble before it comes to me. What does that mean? First, those who have harmed us will pay, then the annoying ones. Everyone who needs to be dealt with until my beloved tranquility returns. The babbling of a maniac. No, he wasn't insane.